They said the woman's body had been in the river for 3 days. My mother stopped chewing halfway through her burger, stared at the TV above the bar, and swallowed like the food had turned to glass. She didn't blink when the camera panned to the bloated face, the pale arm hooked over a rescue diver's shoulder. She just reached for her purse, slid the check toward the waitress, and said, "We're leaving. Now." I didn't ask why. Not when she drove past our motel without slowing. Not when she pulled into a 24-hour drugstore and bought a box of hair dye the color of rust. Hours later, I woke to the sharp chemical sting of ammonia. In the bathroom mirror, under the harsh yellow bulb, she was hacking away her hair with kitchen scissors. A heap of my clothes sat by the door. The suitcases were already zipped. By sunrise, the woman I called Mom was gone. And Marie, with a fresh cut, diner uniform, and a name stitched over her heart, was sitting across from me at breakfast, asking if I wanted pancakes, like nothing had happened. After Marie, there was Linda, Sharon, DB, and at least half a dozen others I've stopped keeping track of. Each one had a different shade of hair, a different laugh, a different way of holding a cigarette. But all of them paid in cash. All of them drove us out of town before the neighbors could learn our last name. The motels blurred together, sagging mattresses, ice machines that coughed more rust than cubes, carpets so stiff they crackled when you walked. Mom always asked for a room on the end, for quiet, but she'd spend half the night sitting up in bed, smoking and staring at the door. Every time I unpacked, I'd leave my school notebooks on top of the bag because I never knew when I'd have to shove them back in and run. I stopped decorating walls with drawings. I stopped making friends past first names. "Why are we moving again?" I asked once, in a town where the smell of the ocean got into everything, and I just started liking it. She smiled, the kind of soft smile that made strangers trust her instantly, and said, "It's safer this way." Safer. At first it sounded like a promise. By the 5th time, it felt like a sentence. The word didn't mean protection anymore. It meant bags half-packed under the bed. It meant I couldn't tell anyone my real birthday. It meant locking the bathroom door when she was in a mood. In one motel, I caught her practicing a new signature over and over, filling up a whole notebook with looping, confident letters until the name looked like it had always been hers. She tore the pages out, lit them in the ashtray, and watched them burn like she was hypnotized. That night I dreamed of the woman in the river, and woke up to find the smell of smoke was real. I was 14 the second time it happened. Different town, different river, but the same sick weight in the pit of my stomach. The news came through on the TV, mounted in the corner of the diner where Mom worked. A waitress I barely knew whispered, "Another woman. They found her in the water near Route 7. She said it with the kind of hushed awe people use when tragedy becomes folklore. That night, when I came back to our room, the curtains were drawn tight. Mom sat on the floor with a shoebox cracked open beside her, papers spilling out like guts. I caught glimpses, envelopes with faded stamps, old receipts, maybe even letters. Her hands shook as she fed them one by one into a metal trash can, a Bic lighter clenched between her fingers. "Go to bed," she said, not even looking at me. Her voice wasn't angry, wasn't sharp. It was flat, like the words themselves were carrying too much weight. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the smell of burning paper seeping into my pillow, listening to the rustle snap flicker as page after page vanished. By the time I woke, the shoebox was gone. So was every trace of ash. At dawn, Verbolis, we were already on the road. She drove fast, knuckles white on the wheel, the silence between us broken only by the hum of tires on asphalt. By noon, we were in a new town, 3 counties over. Mom shook a manager's hand at a truck stop cafe and introduced herself as Claire. Just like that. A name spoken with such confidence you'd never question it. And that's when the pattern started clawing at me. Harder than the hunger in my gut or the ache of leaving friends behind. A body in the river, a fire in the night, a new name in the morning. Every time death surfaced, we didn't just move, we disappeared. The new place was better than most, a half-dead apartment complex with peeling green paint, and a parking lot that smelled like fried grease from the taco stand next door. Mom called it a fresh start, but her eyes kept darting to the blinds, as if the air itself might betray her. I was unpacking when I found it. The dresser drawer stuck halfway, wood swollen from years of cheap spills and heat. I yanked it, and something slid loose, catching the sunlight, a silver locket heavy in my palm. Not cheap mall jewelry, this one had weight. An old-world engraving curling along the edge. I'd seen it before. On the news. Hanging against the pale chest of the woman they'd dragged from the second river, the photo frozen on screen long enough to sear into memory. My throat went dry. I opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside, nothing. Just the faintest trace of perfume. A ghost of someone else's life. "Where'd you get this?" I asked, holding it out when she walked in with another plastic bag of groceries. She froze. Not for long, just long enough to tell me the truth had cut through her mask. Then the softness arrived, the eyes brimming, the sad tilt of her mouth, the practiced tremble in her voice. "It was a gift," she whispered, taking it gently from my hand. "From a friend who's gone now. Gone." She tucked the locket back into her pocket and smoothed my hair like nothing had shifted, like the weight in my stomach wasn't twisting into a knot of suspicion. But that word hung in the room, long after she left. Gone. Not lost, not dead, not even missing. Just gone. The school smelled of bleach and pencil shavings, just like every other one before it. I kept my head down, memorizing the layout of the hallways, making note of which doors had cameras, which stairwells were quiet enough to disappear into, when Mom decided it was time to vanish again. But in fourth period, I got caught. Not by cops, not by Mom's paranoia, but by a teacher. Mr. Hale, history teacher, sleeves rolled up, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much war footage on TV. He stopped at my desk when the bell rang and slid my essay back to me. Instead of a grade, there was a sentence scrawled across the top in red. "You write like someone who's been running." My pulse jumped. For a second, I thought he knew, that he'd seen the forged forms, the recycled addresses, the way my mom's signatures never looked the same twice. But when I looked up, he just gave me this half-smile. "You ever think about college, real college, not just trade school?" Nobody had ever asked me that before. I'd never stayed anywhere long enough to dream beyond the next zip code. But he kept at it, offering to help with applications, scholarships, anything. He even let me eat lunch in his classroom when the cafeteria noise got too loud. Little by little, words spilled out. Not the rivers, never the rivers, but the endless moves, the cardboard boxes that never got unpacked, the birthdays in borrowed kitchens. He listened without judgment, scribbling notes for me about how to frame resilience in an admissions essay. For the first time, I pictured a future not packed into the back of a car, a dorm room, a desk of my own, a name I didn't have to trade in every time the news showed a body on the screen. Mr. Hale leaned across the desk one afternoon, tapping his finger against my draft. "You don't have to keep running forever," he said. It was the kindest lie I'd ever heard. I thought Mr. Hale just liked grading essays too much. Turns out, he liked answers more. One afternoon, when I stayed late to finish an assignment, I saw it. His laptop open on the desk, my name typed into a search bar, surrounded by tabs stacked like dominoes. He shut it fast when he noticed me. Smile stretched a little too wide. "Just pulling up scholarship forms," he said. But the reflection in the black screen had already burned itself into me. Maps, missing persons bulletins, old newspaper clippings. That night, I couldn't shake it. My mother's words came back like smoke in my throat. It's safer this way. What did he know? What was he looking for? I didn't know then that he'd already gone further, that he'd traced the trail of names. Marie, Linda, Claire, like breadcrumbs across counties. That he'd circled 3 unsolved cases where women had turned up in rivers, not far from where we lived under each new alias. He didn't confront me. He didn't ask questions. He made a different call. The next day, in a locked office with blinds drawn, Mr. Hale spoke to someone he thought could keep a secret. The police. He used words like pattern and child at risk. His voice carried urgency, but not the kind that comes from protection. It was the urgency of someone who wanted to be the first to crack open a mystery. While I sat in his classroom, pouring out half-truths in essays he praised for their honesty, he was already building a case behind my back. Piece by piece, name by name, river by river. And in that hidden space between his kindness and his suspicion, a trap was forming, one I wouldn't see until it was too late. By then, I was 17, old enough to drive, old enough to know that every town had its own smell, its own ghosts. I was also old enough to know the news wouldn't leave us alone. The report broke just after dinner. A woman's body, pulled from a river 2 counties over. The anchor's voice was clinical, but the camera lingered on the details. Waterlogged hair, a blurred shot of a necklace, not just any necklace, the silver locket. The same one Mom had told me was a gift from a friend who's gone now. The same one she tucked away, like it burned her skin to touch. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. Mom didn't flinch. She just reached over, clicked the TV off, and said, calm as weather, pack your things, we're leaving, tonight. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask her how the hell that locket had ended up around another dead woman's neck. But the words tangled in my throat, because if I asked, she might answer, and I wasn't sure which would destroy me more, the lie or the truth. I stuffed clothes into the same half-worn duffel I'd carried for years. The motions, automatic, but this time felt different, heavier, like the air itself knew we'd crossed into something irreversible. Watching her, I felt the split inside me, like a bone breaking 2 ways at once. Fear of her, fear for her, both pulling until there was nothing left in the middle. That night, as we drove through the dark, the silence between us was louder than any siren. I stared at her hands on the wheel, steady, sure, and wondered if they had held that locket before they ever held me. They came at dawn, when the world is too quiet, when even the birds haven't decided if it's safe to start singing. The knock wasn't gentle. It was the kind of pounding that rattles glass, the kind that makes neighbors peek through blinds and pretend they didn't. Police! Open up! The hallway filled with boots and voices. Mr. Hale was with them. I saw his reflection first, warped in the bathroom mirror, standing just beyond the door. His tie crooked, face pale with the weight of someone who thinks they're about to save a life. He leaned toward the peephole, like he expected to see me there, grateful. But the room was already empty. The beds were stripped bare, sheets stuffed into garbage bags. The air was sharp with the sting of bleach, enough to burn your throat. In the corner, the bathroom sink still ran, the faucet hissing steady as a clock ticking down. A single drop echoed into the basin, over and over, like a reminder. You're too late. The officers pushed inside, guns drawn, shouting commands into silence. Doors opened, closets checked. Nothing. Just the hollow of a life erased in a hurry. Mr. Hale stood in the doorway, his face folding in on itself. The room smelled like chemicals and absence, a place scrubbed raw of any trace except fear. He looked down at the bleach-stained carpet and knew. He hadn't exposed the truth. He'd triggered the escape. And somewhere on the highway, some miles ahead of him, I was already staring out a car window, the lines on the road blurring into one endless warning. Every time they get close, she gets away. I woke to the hum of tires on broken asphalt, my neck stiff from sleeping against the window. Outside, nothing but pine trees, and a stretch of road that looked like it hadn't seen a car in days. No signs, no towns, just emptiness. Mom's hands were tight on the wheel, eyes fixed forward, like the darkness itself was chasing us. The radio was off. The silence was so heavy, it pressed against my chest. "Where are we going?" My voice cracked, dry from sleep. She didn't answer at first. Then, without looking at me, she said, flat as stone, "If they catch me, they'll take you too." The words landed like a chain around my throat. Not a warning, not even fear. A verdict. My life, my freedom, lashed to hers. I pressed back into the seat, heart pounding. The world outside was dark and endless, and suddenly so was my future. Every mile we drove stretched that tether tighter, binding me to a truth I hadn't wanted to face. I wasn't just her child anymore. I was her alibi, her accomplice, her hostage. I thought of Mr. Hale, of college brochures with dorms and smiling faces, of a world where your name didn't change every time a body surfaced in a river. And then I looked at her, the woman who gave me life, who might also have taken others. She reached over and squeezed my knee, gentle, like a mother tucking you in at night. "You understand, don't you?" I nodded. Because what else could I do on that deserted road, with no map, no way out, and the only person I had left telling me the price of survival was silence? Dawn bled pale over the tree line when the car slowed. We hadn't spoken since her words cut me in half on that deserted road. She pulled over by a bridge where mist clung to the guardrails, the kind of place that feels like the edge of the world. She killed the engine. For a moment, the silence was so complete I could hear my own pulse. Then she reached under the seat, pulled out a crumpled canvas bag, and shoved it into my lap. It sagged heavy with bills, bound by rubber bands. "Get out," she said. I froze. "What?" Her eyes were already wet, but her voice was steady. "Walk until you see a bus stop. Don't look back. Don't ask questions. You'll know what to do." My mouth opened, but nothing came. No plea, no scream. Just the terror of being cut loose by the only anchor I'd ever had, even if that anchor was dragging me under. I stepped out, gravel crunching under my shoes, the bag of money pulling my arm down like it belonged to someone else. The door shut between us, with a soft click. She didn't wait for goodbye. She drove off, tail lights fading into the mist, the sound of the engine swallowed by the river below. I walked. 1 mile. 2. The bag grew heavier. The world grew quieter. When I finally found the bus stop, I sat with strangers who didn't know I was nobody and everybody, all at once. Hours later, on the newsfeed playing from a mounted TV in the station, I saw it. A car dragged from the river by men in neon vests. Reporters shouted over the roar of machinery. No body inside. Just a car. Just an ending that wasn't one. Somewhere, under another name, in another town, she was alive. And so was the question I'd never escape. What had she done to keep running?